I devoted every piece of myself to keeping our family business alive. Long nights, endless spreadsheets, bruised hands, and sleepless weekends. But on Thanksgiving night, when my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Your job is to work while your brother enjoys life," something inside me finally broke. That night, I walked out of their house. My hands trembling, my heart steady. I had made a decision. A decision that would change their lives forever. My name is Clara Bennett, and I'm 30 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, a city that never sleeps, not because of the people, but because of the rain. Every drop against my window reminds me of the years I spent trying to earn the kind of love that should have been freely given. People see me now, a project manager at a respected construction firm, confident, sharp, and composed. But no one sees the scars that built me. Those scars were carved in a small, fading building downtown called Bennett Home Supplies, the store my parents built, and the store that built my silence. I grew up in that store. While other kids spent their summers at the beach, I spent mine hauling paint cans, organizing color swatches, and learning how to smile through exhaustion. I could tell the difference between latex and enamel paint before I even learned algebra. My father, Richard Bennett, ran the place like a drill sergeant, stern, precise, and forever disappointed. My mother, Linda, moved quietly in his shadow, offering soft excuses when his tone cut too deep. And my younger brother, Ethan, floated through life as if the world existed solely to applaud him. The favoritism wasn't hidden. It was proudly displayed like a family trophy. When I was 11, I entered the Washington Junior Design Challenge, a competition for young creators. I built a scale model of an eco-friendly community space using nothing but recycled materials. My design won first place regionally and was displayed at the state building for an entire month. I came home that day holding the certificate in trembling hands, waiting, hoping, for a smile, a hug, something. Dad looked at the paper once and said, "Good. Now go finish cleaning the storage aisle before closing." That was the first time I realized success meant nothing unless it came from my brother. 3 months later, Ethan, only 8 at the time, painted a messy picture of a sunset during his art class. My mother framed it. My father hung copies in both store locations. That evening, they took him out for Mexican food to celebrate his natural talent. He got a new tablet that night. I got a new list of chores. And that became the pattern. Whenever I accomplished something, it disappeared quietly like dust brushed off the counter. Whenever Ethan breathed near a canvas, the world stopped to clap. By the time I was 12, I had stopped waiting for applause. I was restocking paint tubes before school, mopping floors after dinner, and balancing supply invoices by age 14. My father's rule was simple: Ethan's time is for creating, yours is for working. That sentence stuck to me like wet paint. Heavy, suffocating, impossible to scrape off. When I turned 16, most kids were dreaming about prom dresses or cars. I was calculating profit margins. I had become the invisible engine behind Bennett Home Supplies, running weekend shifts alone, learning supplier codes by memory, designing store layouts that doubled foot traffic. Dad called it good practice. Mom said, "You'll thank us one day." But I never did. Ethan's version of work looked different. He'd show up late, rearrange a shelf for inspiration, then leave early to brainstorm. Once, he spilled an entire bucket of paint thinner across the new flooring, and I spent the night scrubbing it until my hands blistered. The next morning, Dad said, "Mistakes happen," and handed Ethan $50 for gas money. I remember standing behind the counter that day, staring at the register light blinking red, out of balance, just like our family. By high school, the difference between us had hardened into truth. Ethan was the dreamer, the artist, the future of the family. I was the one who kept the lights on. But no one ever said thank you. Instead, I learned to find comfort in order, in clean shelves, labeled drawers, and perfectly aligned ledgers. I thought if I kept everything neat enough, maybe life would make sense too. When I finally graduated, I didn't even attend the ceremony. I was too busy covering a weekend shift because Dad didn't want to lose customers on a Saturday. Ethan, on the other hand, got a full year abroad in Florence for an art exchange program, tuition, travel, rent, all covered. My father said it was an investment in his future. I smiled when I heard that. But deep down, I knew what that investment really cost. My years, my effort, my silence. When I left for college, I swore I'd never come back to that store except as a visitor. But promises have a way of cracking under guilt. During my first year at Oregon State University, Dad called. His tone was softer than usual. He said business was slow, that the new competitor across the street was pulling their customers away. Before I could think twice, I transferred money from my savings, $1,000, then another, then another. Each time, he said it would just be this once. It never was. By the time I finished college, I had sent over $15,000 back home. Money that should have gone toward my own rent, my own dreams. But I told myself it was fine. It was family. When I finally graduated, I joined a construction firm as an assistant project coordinator. My pay wasn't much, but my hours were brutal. Even then, I kept sending money home, convincing myself that one day, they'd see my worth. But people don't change when they're comfortable, and my family was far too comfortable living on my effort. Years passed like that, one invoice, one transfer, one missed thank you at a time. Until one November night, when the dinner table finally broke what was left of me. Thanksgiving. A night meant for family, gratitude, and warmth. For me, it became the night I realized how invisible love can make you feel. I remember that evening like a scene burned into film, the soft hum of rain outside, the smell of roasted turkey filling the house, and the faint echo of laughter that wasn't mine. I had driven straight from work, exhausted after a 70-hour week. My laptop sat on the passenger seat beside a stack of contracts waiting for review. I had 3 hotel design projects due before Monday, yet I still came home. Because that's what daughters like me do, we show up, even when no one notices. When I stepped into the dining room, my father didn't even look up. "Did you finish the new product listing for the store?" he asked flatly. I froze, still holding my coat. "Dad, I don't even work there anymore." He waved a hand dismissively. "You know the system better than anyone. Don't play dumb." Before I could answer, Ethan appeared, glowing like he'd just stepped off a magazine cover. He wore a designer jacket and a smug little grin. "Guess what, Dad?" he said, dropping his car keys onto the table. "I just got my car wrapped in matte gold." Mom gasped like he'd just announced world peace. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. How much did it cost?" "About $3,000, he said casually, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "But worth it." Dad chuckled proudly. "That's my boy, reward yourself for working hard." I couldn't help it. I laughed, the bitter kind that escapes before you can swallow it. "Working hard?" I said. "You mean the shop that closed 6 months ago? Or the part where Mom and Dad are still paying your rent?" Ethan shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You don't understand how business works." "Oh really?" I said, my voice trembling. "Because from where I stand, you're the business, and we're the investors, without returns." Mom flinched. "Clara, don't start." But Dad leaned forward, his fork clinking against the plate. "Enough," he said, his tone hard as stone. "You know your brother's trying. He's creative, ambitious. That's more than I can say for someone who hides behind a desk." My chest tightened. "I don't hide, Dad. I work. Every single day. I built my life from nothing, the same way I used to build yours." His eyes met mine, cold and deliberate. "Your job," he said slowly, "is to work while your brother enjoys life. Simple as that. If you don't like it," he pointed toward the door, "there's the way out." For a moment, everything froze. The clinking of silverware stopped. Mom's hand hovered midair. Ethan smirked behind his wine glass. And I felt the years of silence crash through me all at once. All those late nights at the store. All those thank yous that never came. All those times I wired money home and convinced myself it meant something. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. "You know what?" I said, pushing my chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "I think I'll take it." "Clara," Mom began, but I didn't let her finish. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the fridge, the same hook where Ethan's childhood doodles still hung, and walked toward the door. Dad's voice followed me like a whip. After everything we've done for you. I turned halfway, my reflection caught in the glass door. Exactly, I said. After everything I've done for you. The next moment, I was outside, the cold November air biting my face, pine needles crunching under my boots. The house glowed behind me, golden and warm, but I felt nothing. No guilt. No fear. Just clarity, the kind that only comes when something inside you finally stops breaking and starts rebuilding. I stood in the driveway for a long moment, staring at my car through the mist. My hands were trembling, but my heart felt strangely steady. That night, I walked out of their house. My hands trembling, my heart steady. I had made a decision. A decision that would change their lives forever. The drive that night felt endless. Seattle's streets were slick with rain, neon reflections rippling across the windshield like ghosts of old memories. I didn't cry, not once. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something deeper, colder, the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones when you realize you've been living someone else's life all along. I reached my apartment just past midnight. The city outside buzzed with weekend life, laughter spilling from bars, headlights cutting through the mist, but inside it was silent. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. My hands were still shaking. My father's words kept echoing in my head, "Your job is to work while your brother enjoys life." It didn't feel like a command anymore. It felt like a curse, one that I had unknowingly obeyed for years. The next morning, I opened my laptop out of habit. My email inbox blinked with messages from the construction firm, revisions, scheduling updates, site photos. Work was supposed to distract me, but I couldn't focus. My eyes drifted to a folder I hadn't opened in months. Home Supplies Finance. For years, I'd managed the family store's accounts remotely. My father never learned how to use digital spreadsheets properly, so I did it for him: invoices, vendor payments, tax entries. My passwords were still active. Curiosity pulled me in. The first file I opened stopped my breath cold. The mortgage. 3 months behind. Past due amount, $5,400. The document was stamped final notice. My fingers tightened around the mouse. I scrolled through the statements, heart pounding faster with each number that didn't add up. The money I'd been wiring home, my savings, my overtime pay, my sacrifices, none of it had gone toward the store's bills. It had gone to Ethan's workshop, Ethan's auto studio, the same business that had failed 6 months earlier. Attached to the files was a scanned note in my father's handwriting. Remortgaged for business extension. Approved for $25,000. Co-signed, Richard and Linda Bennett. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just negligence. It was betrayal, quiet, deliberate betrayal dressed as family loyalty. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was resolve, the kind that burns slow and steady. I opened a new document and started typing. Subject: termination of financial assistance, effective immediately. This is to confirm that I, Clara Bennett, will no longer provide financial or administrative support for Bennett Home Supplies or any associated entities. All login credentials, payment authorizations, and vendor accounts previously under my management will be deactivated within 48 hours. It took less than 10 minutes to write, but those 10 minutes felt like reclaiming 10 years of my life. When I hit send, my hands didn't shake. The silence that followed was almost sacred. 2 days later, the first voicemail arrived. My father's voice, rough and urgent. "You think walking out fixes anything? Get back here and sort the books before we lose everything." Then Mom's message came. "Clara, please. Your dad's stressed. My back's been acting up again. I can't lift the shipments alone. Call me." And then, as expected, Ethan. "Hey sis, I've got a plan to help us all. I'm organizing a pop-up event for my new car detailing business. Just need 10 grand upfront for supplies. You can wire it tonight and I'll pay you back next month." I deleted his message before it finished playing. By the end of the week, my phone had 47 missed calls, mostly from my parents. Each voicemail blurred into the next: guilt, anger, excuses, pleas. But not once, not a single time, did any of them say, "We're sorry." The following week, the real consequences began. The school district cancelled its annual supply contract with the store, a $12,000 deal I had personally secured the previous year. Vendors placed their accounts on hold, refusing to ship until overdue payments cleared. And Ethan's so-called business partners started calling me directly, asking when the family would settle his debts. That was when I realized something terrifying. They had built their entire safety net on me. Without me, their entire world was beginning to crumble. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and sat by the window as the city lights reflected on the rain-slicked glass. For years, I had kept their world standing. Now I was watching it fall, quietly, beautifully, inevitably. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The silence didn't last long. By the end of the third week, that silence had turned into chaos echoing from every direction. My work phone started ringing with unfamiliar numbers, suppliers, lenders, even old clients from the store. One woman from Cascade Paints and Company sounded nearly desperate. "Clara, your father said you'd send payment this week. We can't ship new stock until the previous balance clears." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I don't handle their accounts anymore," I said firmly. She hesitated. "I understand, but you always did. He said you'd fix it, like you always do." That last sentence stung more than I expected. Because she was right, I always did. I was the quiet safety net no one acknowledged until it broke. I hung up politely, turned my phone face down, and forced myself to keep working on the hotel contracts for my firm. My job, my real job, had started to flourish ever since I stopped carrying the weight of 3 other people. For the first time, I wasn't someone's unpaid accountant or emotional cushion. I was just me. But peace, it seemed, was not something my family would allow me to keep. A week later, an email landed in my inbox from Aunt Violet, my mother's older sister who lived in Tucson. The subject line read, "Urgent, tax issue related to your parents." My stomach tightened as I opened it. Attached were scanned letters from the IRS, audit notices, late filings, missing receipts. But one document stood out, a $50,000 deficiency notice for misreported deductions and unverified business expenses. My father had claimed massive write-offs from Ethan's failed auto workshop, equipment, rent, even car parts that were never purchased, all listed as business losses under the store's name. I scrolled through each line of the report, disbelief turning into a dull ache in my chest. My father's name. My mother's signature. My savings. Their lies. Aunt Violet's note at the bottom was short but sharp. "Clara, I thought you should know before this gets worse. They listed me as secondary contact years ago. They're drowning. Don't let them pull you under too." I sat there staring at the screen, the words "don't let them pull you under" echoing louder than the rain outside. That evening, the inevitable call came. Dad's voice cracked through the line, quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Violet talked to you, didn't she?" "Yes," I said. He sighed, not the kind of sigh that came from age, but from the weight of collapse. "We're not asking for money, Clara. Just come back for 1 month. Help us fix the books. The accountant messed up everything. Your mother's been sick, Ethan's overwhelmed. We just need you to set it right." Then Mom's voice joined, softer, pleading. "Your dad's trying his best. We'll pay you consultant rates once things stabilize, I promise." I said nothing. There was a time when those words would have melted me, pulled me right back into the mess. But not this time. Through the phone, I heard Ethan in the background, his tone casual and entitled as ever. "She can work remotely, right? I mean, she's good with that stuff. Saves her the drive." Something inside me snapped again, not in anger but in finality. I took a slow breath and said, "No." The silence on the other end was heavy, like the whole world had stopped breathing. Then Dad said quietly, "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I didn't answer that. I simply hung up. That night, I drafted one last email, not as a daughter, but as a professional. Subject: formal notice of financial separation. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing all administrative and financial involvement from Bennett Home Supplies and any related accounts. This includes online bookkeeping access, vendor portals, and digital authorizations. Please do not contact me regarding business or financial matters again. I wish you stability, but from this point forward, I am not part of your operations. I signed it, attached the IRS notice, and hit send. The next morning, I changed my phone number. For the first time in my life, there was no buzzing, no guilt-ridden calls, no manipulation disguised as love. Just quiet, real, steady, liberating quiet. But peace comes with a strange kind of grief. For weeks, I'd wake up expecting to check their emails, fix their numbers, or solve their next mistake. Now, all that space was mine, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. Then one evening, as I sat by my window watching the skyline glow orange against the rain clouds, I realized something. I had spent my entire life holding up a house that was never meant to stand. Now that it had finally fallen, I was free to build something of my own. 6 months. That's how long it took for the dust to finally settle. By then, I had changed my number, blocked every old contact tied to the store, and moved into a new apartment, a quiet, sunlit corner unit in Queen and, overlooking the Seattle skyline. The kind of place I used to think only belonged to people who didn't come from chaos. The first night I slept there, it rained again. But this time, the sound didn't remind me of work or guilt. It reminded me of release. I thought the chapter was over. But families like mine have a way of finding you, even when you've disappeared. It started with a message from Aunt Violet again. Just one line. They sold the store. I didn't open the attachment right away. I sat there for several minutes, staring at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. When I finally clicked, the photo showed the old Bennett Home Supplies storefront, stripped bare. The red and white sign that had hung there for 3 decades was gone. In its place, a new banner read, Albuquerque Home Depot, coming soon. The sale report said everything I needed to know. The store inventory had been sold off at 60 cents on the dollar. The proceeds barely covered the IRS lien, leaving my parents with about $4,000 in total. The same couple who once lectured me about family pride now rented a small, 1-bedroom apartment near the rail yard district, barely able to cover utilities. And Ethan? He was back where he started, working part-time at a custom framing counter inside a craft store. His pay was $13.25 an hour. The same boy who once bragged about $3,000 car wraps now spent his evenings trimming picture mats for other people's artwork. When I read that, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just exhaled. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about balance. Life had simply returned what they had given. I remember walking to my balcony that night, wrapping my hands around a mug of coffee as the wind brushed through my hair. Below me, the city glowed, steady, alive, indifferent. I whispered to myself, this is what freedom feels like. That same week, my career took off in ways I hadn't imagined possible. My firm, Westline Projects, had secured a full interior design contract for a luxury mountain resort in Taos, New Mexico. It was the kind of project every project manager dreams of. $2.5 million in scope, 40 guest suites, custom architectural finishes, sustainable design goals. My name was listed as lead project manager. Every late night I'd spent in that store, every missed opportunity, every time I'd been told I was just a helper, it all converged into that moment. The irony didn't escape me. The same hands that once scrubbed paint off shelves were now designing multi-million-dollar spaces. And yet, even with the success, the quiet ache remained, not of regret but of finality. Aunt Violet visited me one evening on her way to Vancouver. She brought a small envelope and set it on my kitchen counter. Your parents asked me to give you this, she said. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother. Clara, your father and I know we made mistakes. We lost more than a store. We lost you. We don't expect forgiveness, but we want you to know that your strength. It taught us more than our pride ever could. Love, Mom. I read it twice, tracing the curve of her handwriting. There were tear stains on the paper. But the strange thing was, I didn't cry. Because forgiveness isn't about returning. It's about releasing the weight. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer of my desk, not as a keepsake, but as proof that the story had finally turned a page. That weekend, I stood in my new office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Space Needle, project sketches pinned across the walls, blueprints spread open on the desk. My assistant walked in and said, "Congratulations, Clara. You're officially being considered for partnership next quarter." I smiled, not the polite smile I used to wear at the store, but a real one. The kind that comes when you finally stop surviving and start living. I looked out at the city that had watched me break and rebuild and whispered to myself, I didn't leave them behind. I just stopped carrying them. Success didn't roar into my life. It arrived quietly, in small victories, in the steady rhythm of purpose, in the peace of not explaining myself anymore. There were no apologies from my father, no phone calls from Ethan, no attempts to bridge what was lost. And yet, I didn't need any of that. Because by then, I'd realized something powerful: silence can be the loudest justice. For years, I had been their solution, the person who fixed everything they broke. When I stepped away, I didn't destroy their world, I simply stopped rebuilding it. And the truth is, that was enough. 6 months after the resort project wrapped up, I stood on the balcony of El Montesagrado, the luxury property my firm had just completed in Taos. The scent of cedar hung in the cold air, and the sound of wind through the pines reminded me of home, but softer, kinder. I ran my fingers along the carved wooden railing, staring out at the mountains that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about who needed me. I was thinking about who I was becoming. Later that evening, as I walked through the finished suites, one of the investors stopped me. "You have a remarkable eye for balance," he said. "The way you blend structure with softness, it feels human." I smiled politely, but inside, his words echoed deeper than he knew. Balance with softness. That was something I had fought my entire life to find, in family, in work, in myself. Back in Seattle, life moved on without headlines or fanfare. My parents' days had grown quieter too. Aunt Violet occasionally sent short updates. Dad now worked the night shift at FedEx, scanning and loading packages for $21.50 an hour. Mom spent weekends at the Canyon Road Market, painting small watercolors of adobe doorways and selling them to tourists for $60 apiece. And Ethan, the golden boy, had found something humbling. He was still at the craft store, framing other people's art, but his online videos had slowly gained a small following. Not for luxury or fame, but for honesty. His posts were about failure, lessons, and starting over. At first, I ignored those updates. But over time, something inside me softened. Maybe because I had learned to separate accountability from cruelty. People deserve consequences, but sometimes, consequences are also the best teachers. I didn't call them. I didn't reach out. But one evening, as I sat sketching designs for a new eco-housing project, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There it was, a picture from years ago, me and Ethan, standing outside the store. My hands covered in paint, his hair sticking up like a bird's nest. We couldn't have been older than 10 and 13. I smiled. Not because I missed it, but because I had finally made peace with the girl in that photo. The one who thought she had to earn love through labor. Now, I knew better. Love isn't a paycheck. Loyalty isn't servitude. And family, real family, doesn't demand silence as proof of devotion. Weeks later, I mailed something small to my parents' new address. It wasn't money. It wasn't a letter. It was a watercolor painting, one of mine. A small sketch of a ladder leaning against a half-painted wall. At the bottom, I wrote one sentence. I finished what I started. That was it. No return address. No name needed. It wasn't closure through words. It was closure through truth. That night, I poured a glass of red wine and stepped onto my balcony. The city lights shimmered like scattered gold dust below me. I realized then, the same hands that once built someone else's dream were now shaping mine. And that, I thought, was the real inheritance I'd earned. A year passed before I realized how much life had changed. The woman I used to be, the one who begged to be seen, who worked until her hands hurt just to earn a single word of approval, she was gone. In her place stood someone steady. Someone who didn't owe anyone her peace. Seattle had become more than just a city to me. It was a reflection of everything I had fought for. The rain didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt cleansing. My mornings began with quiet walks through the park near my building, my coffee in hand, my mind already spinning with ideas for the next project. By that time, my firm had made me associate partner. My salary had doubled, and for the first time in my life, money didn't feel like survival. It felt like choice. I invested in things I loved: sustainable design, creative workshops for women in construction, and community renovation programs. I built connections not out of obligation, but out of purpose. One morning, I received an email that stopped me mid-sip of coffee. Subject: Speaking Invitation Women in Leadership, Seattle Summit. They wanted me to give the opening address, to talk about resilience, leadership, and breaking generational expectations. At first, I hesitated. My instinct was to decline. Talking about my past felt too raw, too exposed. But something inside me whispered, it's time. When the day arrived, I stood backstage at the downtown convention center, staring at the rows of empty seats filling fast. I wasn't nervous, just grounded. The host introduced me. Our next speaker is a Seattle-based project manager who turned adversity into empowerment. Please welcome Clara Bennett. The applause was warm, not loud, but real. I walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began. I grew up believing that silence was strength, that if you worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and never complained, you'd eventually be valued. But the truth is, silence only keeps you small. I learned that lesson the hard way. 4 years, I worked to build something that was never mine. A business, a family image, a dream that belonged to everyone but me. And when I finally walked away, I didn't know who I was without their approval. But then I discovered something beautiful. Freedom isn't the absence of responsibility, it's the right to choose where your energy goes. And when you start giving that energy to yourself, everything changes. There was a long pause before the applause began. But this time, it wasn't just noise, it was connection. I looked around the room and saw women wiping tears, nodding silently, some holding their phones up to record. In that moment, I realized something profound. I had turned my pain into purpose. And that purpose now had a voice. After the event, I sat alone in the lobby cafe, still processing everything, when a woman approached me, middle-aged, dressed simply, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I left my family's store last year. They still won't talk to me. But after hearing you, I don't feel alone anymore. I smiled softly. You're not, I said. You're rebuilding. As she walked away, I thought about how far I had come, from the girl stocking shelves in a cramped store to the woman helping others step out of their own cages. That night, I went home and opened the letter drawer where my mother's note still sat. I hadn't touched it in months. I unfolded it once more, traced the words, and then, for the first time, whispered aloud. I forgive you. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. And in that whisper, I finally let go of the last piece of who I used to be. The next morning, I packed my bag, booked a weekend flight to Santa Fe, and visited the old street where our family store once stood. The sign was gone, the windows now filled with construction posters for a new retail expansion. I stood there quietly, breathing in the dry air. No pain. No anger. Just gratitude. The past was no longer a wound, it was a foundation. Santa Fe smelled like sun-baked clay and rain that never quite fell. I hadn't been back in more than 10 years, and the streets felt smaller than I remembered. Where Bennett Home Supplies once stood, scaffolding now covered the facade, construction tops flapping in the wind. A sign read, Future Site of Rail Yard Marketplace, Local Art and Design. I stood across the street, watching the workers carry beams inside. A part of me almost wanted to walk in, to tell them that I used to sweep those same floors when they were coated in paint dust and family tension. But instead, I just smiled. The store was gone, but its ghost didn't hurt me anymore. I sat on a bench near the plaza, sipping cold lemonade, and for the first time in my life I realized I wasn't anyone's daughter, sister, or employee at that moment. I was simply Clara. A woman who had built something lasting out of everything that once tried to break her. I opened my sketchbook and started drawing. A small house, nothing fancy, just warm light spilling from the windows and 2 trees beside it. Underneath, I wrote, "Home is not a place. It's peace you create yourself." As the sun began to set, the phone in my pocket buzzed, an unknown number. For a second, old instincts stirred, but curiosity won. I answered. "Clara." The voice was shaky but familiar. It was my mother. "I just wanted to tell you," she said, "your father retired last month. Ethan's saving to open a small framing shop on his own. We're doing okay. And we're proud of you." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing, hesitant, fragile, real. "Thank you," I finally said. "I'm glad you're finding your way. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. Some things are better left suspended in understanding." That night, back in my hotel room, I stood by the window, watching the orange lights fade over the New Mexico hills. My reflection stared back at me, older, steadier, free. I thought about the girl who once begged for validation, the young woman who worked herself into exhaustion, and the moment I walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner. I had believed that walking away would end everything, but instead, it began my life. Now, every morning I woke up in my Seattle apartment with sunlight cutting through the blinds, coffee brewing, and silence that didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. My projects grew, my team trusted me, and I started mentoring young women entering architecture and project management. Each one of them reminded me of who I used to be, hopeful, terrified, and hungry to prove themselves. And each time I told them the same thing. Don't confuse being needed with being valued. Build something that belongs to you. One evening, as I closed my laptop after a long day of reviewing blueprints, I looked around my condo, the tall ceilings, the soft hum of the city below, the life I'd created with my own 2 hands, and whispered to myself, "This is what freedom feels like." No applause. No validation. Just the quiet certainty that I had rewritten my story, not with revenge, but with redemption. I poured myself a glass of wine, stepped out onto the balcony, and watched the city lights shimmer like reflections of everything I'd survived. The wind brushed against my face, cool and steady, carrying the faint scent of rain. And in that moment, I realized the truest thing of all: I hadn't lost a family. I had found myself.